Kilpatrick's sexting messages, like text messages, to his chief of staff, whom he was having an affair with, was one of the, if not the funniest thing I have ever read, period. Whether or not it's accurate or true doesn't matter as far as its comedic value. I fucking died. Better than food, man. Do you like these intros? Are they getting annoying? Please let me know in the comments below, because I constantly find myself just skipping through other YouTubers' intros these days. It's like, I love the content, it's just a pain in the ass to like get through on your phone. So it's like, if you're doing that with these, then just let me know. I mean, it's less work for me, so I can like shorten it up, or I can just like chuck it, get rid of it, whatever, it doesn't matter, you know. I'm not attached, so let me know. Thanks. Kind of settling into the new studio here. These are all my books, basically. I thought I had a lot more of them. Guess not. Anyways, kind of embarrassing. For today, I've got some nonfiction for a change. Detroit, An American Autopsy by Charlie Leduff. This would pair like beer and whiskey with Elmore Leonard's Swag, which I just reviewed. I've known about this book for a while. I've been meaning to get to it. It was actually a gift from a good friend. And I've seen it everywhere here. You know, it's like, Detroit is very proud of itself. I mean, for good reason, but you see a lot of Detroit stuff everywhere, right? And this is definitely one of those books that keeps popping up. There are definitely others out there, but I just decided to start with this one because it seems to be the most popular. So Detroit, legendary, mythic in proportion. Home of the auto industry, the first mile of concrete, Motown, and the greatest punk rock band in the entire history of fucking ever, the Stooges. No, not the MC5, the Stooges. And they're from Ann Arbor, Iggy's from Ypsilanti, close enough. There used to be 2 million people in the city of Detroit. Now there's around 700,000, right? The auto industry closed down, racism, and then riots in 1943 and 1967. Then that was followed by white flight, where all the white people left. They moved out to the suburbs. They took their tax dollars with them. Auto industry continued to decline, and then, yeah, heroin was a big factor. Drugs, you know, but Young Boys Incorporated and all that shit. There's actually a whole podcast on Spotify called Crime Town, and I haven't listened to the whole thing, but it was pretty good. They got their theme music is a song by this band called Death, which was a terrific band from Detroit, which they have a whole documentary on them called A Band Called Death. It's great. Not the death metal with Chuck Schuldiner and all that, but all these punk guys from Detroit in the late 70s. And all black. Terrific. Great music. It is a magnificent city in every sense of the word, but it has gone through some tough times. So I first saw Leduff, years back when he was on Parts Unknown with Anthony Bourdain, the Detroit episode. I know there are people around here who dislike Leduff and criticize him, implying his stuff is sensational or something. I'm not exactly sure what the big criticisms are. But as far as the writing is concerned, I think he's a great writer. I'm a neutral party, I don't know much about him. I'm just reviewing the book, which I enjoyed. So enough of the throat clearing, right? Because locally it seems to be a sensitive topic. I'm not sure what the truth is, I'm really not. It seems to depend on who you ask in many cases. I'm still a student. I'm still taking in all the information. I'm still getting all the perspectives. I'm trying to learn the history from different sources. But like I said, this was the first one I picked up, so I'm reviewing this book. And this is excellent. This is a great book. But first off, this is not a comprehensive history of Detroit, or even what went wrong. It's one man's story about returning back to his incredible but historically corrupt hometown. You gotta remember that Detroit is not the only, or even maybe the most corrupt city. Of course, we've had like Chicago, New York. Corruption is not specific to Detroit, but its style of corruption is very unique. So this is personal anecdotes and stories with a little bit of history. Second, there's no happy ending in this one. I mean, it's ambiguous. Because honestly, what kind of predictions can one make? Though you could spin it like I and Charlie are painting a dark picture of Detroit, I want to state, first and foremost, that he seems to love this city, and so do I. I think it's unbelievable. Like, just in everything about it. It's amazing. It's a film outside every day. But it's also extreme, not just in attitude, but also in the weather, right? During the winter. Holy shit. This is easily one of the most amazing places I've ever been to, and I like to think that I've been around a little. I've seen New York and LA, I've been to Paris and Tokyo, I've seen Hong Kong, Berlin, Marrakesh, Madrid, Lisbon, Budapest, Montreal. None of those places are as intense as Detroit. None of them. None of them come close. It's completely different. Like maybe downtown Los Angeles in some ways. in the grit and the danger and just the, what would you call it? The horror, right? But when you throw this extreme weather on top of it, you have a completely different reality. That being said, it's not so bad. I mean, it definitely depends on where you are, but you know, it's pretty good. Except Detroit drivers make LA drivers look like Portland, Oregon drivers. Did that make sense? I mean, right now we have a serial killer going around and leaving bodies in abandoned houses, like not too far away from here. So, right? I mean, but back in LA, I mean, somebody was shot a few floors below us in our apartment building, shot and killed, executed, basically. So it's like, but how's your life going? Hunter S. Thompson, Ernest Hemingway, and maybe Clint Eastwood all rolled into one Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. You really couldn't write a better character than Charlie Leduff. In this book are stories about underfunded firefighters, life, death, somewhere in between, and murder, desperation and hard times in the neighborhoods of Detroit, and how Leduff discovers a man frozen in the bottom of an elevator shaft, who was actually Otis Redding's second cousin. It's deeply personal, it's really, really open, it's kind of vulnerable, but it's also hard, it's aggressive, unapologetic, gritty, all that kind of stuff. If you enjoy crime, it's like a tough guy with a heart kind of writing, right? He's worked for Fox, the Detroit News, the New York Times, and now he has a podcast called the No BS News Hour about current events here in Detroit. But it's great. He's got this big CNN logo, except it says NBN. He's a funny dude. His bold manner holds nothing back, and he does paint a really grim portrait of this beautiful fallen empire. Plenty of the city is still very dangerous, and not that far away. It's really block by block, like literally. Because you see, if I were to walk that direction for about 15 minutes, if I were to just take the camera off and we'd go for a walk together, down my block, down the street, across the highway, we'd be in urban prairie land. You see like tall grass with pheasants. It's actually really beautiful. There's ghosts everywhere, all over. It's like one of the most haunted places I've ever been. Shells of bars and the bones of burnt down houses. The famous Packard plant is less than 10 minutes away. Detroit was a mecca of industry in the mid-20th century. The automobile empire. Henry Ford, right? GM. The Motor City. But Leduff says the city's been dying ever since the Japanese figured out how to make a better car. Like he says in the book, in 2008 we had the big crash, and then suddenly Detroit was in the spotlight because of how bad things had gotten. Journalists parachuted into town. The subjects in my Detroit news stories started appearing in Rolling Stone and the Wall Street Journal, on NPR and PBS and CNN, but under someone else's byline. The reporters rarely, if ever, offered nuanced appraisals of the city and its place in the American landscape. They simply took a tour of the ruins, ripped off the local headlines, pronounced it awful here, and left. And it is awful here. There is no other way to say it. But I believe that Detroit is America's city. It was the vanguard of our way up, just as it is the vanguard of our way down. And one hopes the vanguard of our way up again. Detroit is Pax Americana, the birthplace of mass production, the automobile, the cement road, the refrigerator, frozen peas, high-paid blue-collar jobs, home ownership and credit on mass scale. America's way of life was built here. It's where installment purchasing on a large scale was invented in 1919 by General Motors to sell their cars. It was called the Arsenal of Democracy in the 1940s, the place where the war machines were made to stop the march of fascism. Yep. The city of Detroit, I learned, burned to the ground 3 times. Since its founding, Detroit has been a place of perpetual flames. 3 times the city has suffered race riots, and 3 times the city has burned to the ground. The city's flag acknowledges as much, and then it has this phrase in Latin that I can't pronounce, but it says what it means is, "We hope for better things. It shall rise from the ashes." This city and its history may have been dangerous, depressing, and brutal, but it sure as hell has never been boring. So in the beginning, Leduff is hanging out in LA, being a stay-at-home dad, bored, and he gets some advice from Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people, that in part inspires him to go home. So he calls up the Detroit News and is invited to come back and chronicle the decline of the great industrial American city. So this is his story about coming home and writing the stories in Detroit, mixed in with personal history and stories from his own past, which is, like many in the cities, a tragic one. Sometimes self-deprecating. I mean, it's not always a flattering portrayal, So he also follows Detroit firefighters and tells their stories. Their funding is gone, and one of them, who's a friend of his, is killed in a house that was set on fire. Arson was rampant in Detroit and has been historically. They call the night before Halloween, October 30th, Devil's Night, because of all the arson. I read there were 800 fires set in 1984. Detroit's former corrupt mayor, Kwame Kilpatrick, currently serving his sentence behind bars, is often mentioned in the book. Leduff frequently discusses Kilpatrick's affairs and his affairs. Kilpatrick's sexting messages, like text messages to his chief of staff, whom he was having an affair with, was one of the, if not the funniest thing I have ever read, period. Whether or not it's accurate or true doesn't matter as far as its comedic value. I fucking died. Stranger than fiction, right? So Leduff is searching for the truth, and along the way, he makes some shocking discoveries, not only about the city's past, but his own. I won't spoil it for you, but you know, that's what the book is about. It's about this man searching for the truth in his own life and in his hometown, the place where he came from. What went wrong, right? What went wrong, you know? And that resonates, you know, that makes for a great read, you know, because that's what we're all trying to figure out. In the end, it seems like he's at a crossroads. Things could get better or worse. This was back in 2013. And to be fair, by a lot of metrics, things seem to have gotten better. Not perfect, better. So if you're into crime fiction style blended with nonfiction and appreciate a bold, unapologetic, gritty type of journalism, then check it out. I will say it's worth your time, particularly if you're interested in the history of America, of which Detroit has had a huge part. But also if you like travel fiction, you know, like again, Bourdain, Hunter S. Thompson, Elmore Leonard, hard-boiled crime fiction. If you're interested in the subject of the American dream and what's happening over here in the States, what with our overdoses, suicide, and unemployment, yeah, it's a good one to check out. Better than food. So who's gonna get it? For the coffee lottery. For those of you who are new, the coffee lottery is where I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more to support the show. I place their names in this mason jar, and for each review that I do, I pull out a name, and whoever's name I pull out gets sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of delicious coffee that I roast myself. So if you're interested in getting in on that, you can head over to the description box below, click the link, or just head over to patreon.com/booksarbetterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video. $1 or more will get you access to the patron-only reviews, and thanks a bunch. And thank you to all the patrons who have supported the show already. Really appreciate it. Good luck to you all. So, here we go. Give me that. Claire J. Thanks a bunch, Claire. Really appreciate it. Always remember, bring a book wherever you are, because you never know when you'll have a little bit of time to read. Please subscribe for more book reviews if you haven't already. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. You can also find me on Instagram. So, take care of yourselves, have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.